What if I told you that banning someone from campus could backfire so spectacularly that it created the largest free speech movement in university history? What if I told you that banning someone from campus could backfire so spectacularly that it created the largest free speech movement in university history? What if the student leaders who thought they were protecting their campus from dangerous ideas actually triggered the most powerful demonstration of free speech principles their university had ever seen? And what if their attempt to silence one conservative voice ended up amplifying it to millions of people worldwide? This is how the University of Michigan Student Union learned that censorship doesn't eliminate ideas, it makes them irresistible. The University of Michigan's Central Student Government Building was buzzing with activity as Student Union President Sarah Chen, 22, called an emergency meeting. A senior political science major with aspirations for law school and eventually Congress, Sarah had built her campus reputation on progressive activism and strategic political maneuvering. She was everything a modern student leader was supposed to be: articulate, passionate, and uncompromisingly committed to social justice. The crisis that brought her leadership to the test was simple. Charlie Kirk had been invited to speak at Michigan by the college Republicans, and Sarah was determined to stop it. She had the power, the support, and what she believed was the moral authority to protect her campus from what she considered hate speech. Charlie Kirk, 30, was scheduled to speak about free speech and the future of American democracy in 2 weeks, but Sarah had other plans. She'd spent days building a coalition of progressive student groups, faculty allies, and administrative supporters who agreed that Kirk's presence would create an unsafe environment for marginalized students. But what happened when Sarah announced the ban revealed the campus divide. After careful consideration and consultation with student safety advocates, Sarah announced to the packed student government meeting, "Central Student Government has voted to revoke the venue authorization for Charlie Kirk's planned appearance. The safety and well-being of our students must come first." The room erupted. Progressive students applauded loudly, but a significant portion of the audience, including many students who weren't even conservative, looked uncomfortable with the decision. Marcus Rodriguez, a junior philosophy major, stood up from the audience. "Sarah, who gave you the authority to decide what ideas students can and can't hear?" Sarah was prepared for this question. The student union has a responsibility to ensure that campus events don't promote hate speech or create hostile environments for vulnerable students. "What hate speech?" Marcus pressed. "Have you actually read what Charlie Kirk says, or are you just going by what activist groups told you?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had received detailed briefings from progressive organizations about Kirk's dangerous rhetoric, but she hadn't actually researched his positions herself. "I don't need to platform fascist propaganda to understand its harm," Sarah replied, using language she'd learned from her activist training. The first sign of resistance came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a liberal political science professor who had taught Sarah, stood up from the faculty section. "Sarah, I disagree with many of Mr. Kirk's positions, but calling him a fascist undermines the seriousness of that term. How do we distinguish between actual authoritarianism and political disagreement if we use the same labels for both?" Sarah felt the room's energy shifting. Dr. Walsh was supposed to be an ally, not a questioner of progressive orthodoxy. "Professor Walsh, with respect, this isn't about political disagreement. This is about preventing the spread of ideologies that target our most vulnerable students." "Which students specifically?" Dr. Walsh asked. "And how does preventing them from hearing different perspectives help them develop critical thinking skills?" Sarah realized she was losing control of the narrative. She decided to end the meeting quickly. "The decision has been made," she announced. "Charlie Kirk will not be speaking at the University of Michigan. This meeting is adjourned." But Marcus Rodriguez wasn't done. "What if he shows up anyway?" Sarah smirked confidently. "Security will remove him from campus. He has no right to be here." What happened next shocked everyone, including Sarah. 3 days later, Sarah was walking across the Diag, Michigan's Central Campus quad, when she noticed an unusual crowd gathering. Students were pulling out their phones, recording something happening near the iconic Michigan Union building. As she got closer, her blood ran cold. There, standing on a small platform that someone had set up, speaking to a growing crowd of students, was Charlie Kirk. He hadn't come for an official event. He wasn't in a university building. He was simply standing in a public space on campus, talking to students who had voluntarily gathered to listen. Sarah immediately called campus security. "Charlie Kirk is on campus illegally," she told the dispatcher. "He needs to be removed immediately." "Ma'am," the security officer responded, He's in a public area of campus. Unless he's violating university policy or state law, we can't remove him." Sarah was furious. Her ban was being circumvented by the simple fact that public universities are by definition public spaces. The crowd around Kirk was growing by the minute. Word spread quickly across social media. Students were live streaming Kirk's impromptu appearance. The hashtag #FreedomAtMichigan began trending. But what was happening wasn't what Sarah had feared. It was worse for her narrative. Kirk wasn't giving a political rally or attacking progressive students. He was having calm, respectful conversations with anyone who approached him. Students were asking questions, sharing their perspectives, and engaging in exactly the kind of thoughtful dialogue that universities are supposed to foster. Sarah watched in horror as even liberal students approached Kirk with genuine curiosity rather than hostility. They were discovering that the dangerous extremist she'd warned them about was actually willing to listen to their concerns and respond thoughtfully to their questions. "This is exactly why we need more conversations like this on college campuses," Kirk was telling a group of students. "You don't have to agree with me, but you have the right to hear different perspectives and make up your own minds." A progressive student challenged him, "But your policies would hurt marginalized communities." "Which policies specifically?" Kirk asked. "And can you help me understand how they would cause harm? I genuinely want to hear your perspective." Sarah realized her strategy had completely backfired. Instead of preventing Kirk from speaking, the ban had created massive interest in what he had to say. Instead of protecting students from dangerous ideas, it had made those ideas seem forbidden, and therefore more appealing. Instead of demonstrating strong leadership, Sarah had shown that she was afraid of open debate. Worse, the conversation happening on the dialogue was exactly what universities should promote: respectful dialogue between people with different perspectives. Students were learning from each other, challenging assumptions, and developing critical thinking skills. Sarah decided she had to intervene directly. She marched through the crowd and confronted Kirk face to face. "You have no right to be here," she declared loudly, her voice carrying across the quad. "I banned your event to protect students from your hate speech." Kirk looked at her calmly. "You must be Sarah Chen. I've heard great things about your academic work. Can you help me understand what I've said that constitutes hate speech?" The question was asked sincerely, without defensiveness or hostility. Sarah had prepared for anger or attacks, not genuine curiosity about her position. The moment that exposed everything came next. "You promote policies that harm women and minorities," Sarah said, repeating her talking points. "Can you be specific?" Kirk asked. "I want to understand your concerns so we can have a productive conversation." Sarah realized she was trapped. She'd made public accusations, but had never actually researched what Kirk's specific positions were. She'd relied entirely on activist summaries and social media posts. "Your organization opposes reproductive rights," she said, hoping to find solid ground. "We support helping women in difficult situations," Kirk replied. "Our scholarship program has helped hundreds of women afford college so they don't feel pressured to choose between education and motherhood." "Do you think that's harmful?" The crowd was now completely focused on their exchange. Students were recording everything. Sarah could feel the conversation slipping away from her. "You oppose LGBTQ+ rights," she tried again. "Can you point to a specific policy or statement where I've opposed anyone's rights?" Kirk asked. Sarah couldn't. She'd never actually investigated what Kirk's organization said about LGBTQ+ issues, beyond activist characterizations. Then came the question that changed everything. "Sarah," Kirk said gently, "can I ask you something? Have you ever actually read anything I've written, watched a full speech I've given, or researched the positions my organization actually holds?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. The crowd was silent, waiting for Sarah's response. I don't need to research hate speech to know it's harmful," Sarah said weakly. "But how do you know it's hate speech if you haven't researched what was actually said?" Kirk asked. The logical trap was obvious to everyone watching. Sarah had banned someone from campus based on second-hand characterizations rather than primary sources. She'd made public accusations without doing basic research. "I trust the organizations that briefed me on your positions," Sarah said defensively. "Would you trust conservative organizations to accurately characterize progressive positions?" Kirk asked. "Or would you want to hear what progressives actually believe from progressives themselves?" The devastating realization spread through the crowd. Students began to understand what had happened. Their student union president had banned a speaker not based on what he'd actually said or done, but based on what activist groups had told her he represented. "Sarah," a liberal student called out from the crowd, "did you really ban him without even knowing what his actual positions are?" Another student added, "How can we trust student government to make decisions about free speech if they don't do basic research?" Sarah felt the quad turning against her. Even progressive students who agreed with her politics were uncomfortable with her methods. "I was protecting vulnerable students," she said desperately. "From what?" Kirk asked gently. "From hearing ideas they disagree with? From having to think critically about complex issues? From developing the skills they'll need to engage with diverse perspectives in the real world?" The final blow came from an unexpected source. Dr. Walsh, the liberal professor who had questioned Sarah at the student government meeting, had been watching the exchange from the edge of the crowd. She stepped forward. "Sarah, I've been teaching here for 15 years, she said. "I've seen a lot of speakers come and go. Some I've agreed with, some I haven't, but I've never seen a student leader ban someone without even researching their actual positions." The professor turned to address the crowd. "This is exactly why free speech matters on college campuses, not because all ideas are equally valid, but because the process of encountering and evaluating different perspectives is how we develop wisdom and critical thinking skills." She looked back at Sarah. "You tried to protect students from ideas you disagreed with, but you ended up depriving them of the opportunity to think for themselves." The crowd began to applaud, not for Kirk's politics but for the principle Dr. Walsh had articulated. The aftermath was immediate and transformative. Videos of the exchange went viral within hours. Freedom at Michigan exploded across social media, but the narrative wasn't what Sarah had expected. Students weren't outraged at Kirk. They were questioning why their student government had tried to prevent them from hearing different perspectives. A petition demanding Sarah's resignation gathered 8,000 signatures in 24 hours. Editorial boards at student newspapers across the country wrote about the importance of intellectual diversity. Even liberal students at Michigan began demanding answers about their student union's decision-making process. Sarah's political career, which had seemed so promising just days earlier, collapsed almost instantly. Law schools that had been interested in her application began withdrawing their offers. Internships were rescinded. Her reputation for principled leadership was replaced by a perception that she was authoritarian and close-minded. But the most significant change was on campus itself. Students began organizing events specifically focused on viewpoint diversity and free speech. The Freedom at Michigan movement that grew out of Kirk's impromptu appearance became a model for universities nationwide. The lesson resonated far beyond Ann Arbor. Sarah Chen learned that censorship doesn't eliminate ideas, it advertises them. That banning speakers doesn't protect students, it insults their intelligence. That true leadership means trusting people to think for themselves, not deciding what they're allowed to hear. She discovered that the best way to counter speech you disagree with isn't censorship, it's better speech. That the most effective way to expose bad ideas is to let them compete in the marketplace of ideas rather than hiding them in the shadows. Most importantly, she learned that students don't need protection from different perspectives, they need exposure to them. The critical thinking skills that universities exist to develop can only be built by encountering and evaluating diverse viewpoints. The transformation was complete and lasting. 6 months later, Sarah published a public apology in the Michigan Daily, admitting that she had made a serious mistake by banning Kirk without researching his actual positions. She acknowledged that her actions had violated the principles of free inquiry that universities exist to protect. Charlie Kirk, meanwhile, was invited back to Michigan the following semester, this time officially, with Sarah's successor's full support. The event drew the largest crowd in the university's history, with students eager to engage in the kind of open dialogue that should be normal on college campuses. That day on the dialogue proved something that every university administrator, student leader, and citizen needs to remember. Free speech isn't dangerous to democracy, it's essential to it. Censorship doesn't protect people from bad ideas, it prevents them from developing the skills to recognize and reject those ideas themselves. Because when you try to protect people from ideas by banning them, you're not showing faith in truth's ability to triumph, you're showing fear that your own ideas can't compete. And sometimes the most powerful way to demonstrate the value of free speech isn't to give a planned lecture, it's to show up anyway and trust people to think for themselves. If this story reminds you why free speech matters more than comfortable speech, why trust in students' intelligence matters more than protection from disagreement, then subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember that the best ideas don't fear competition, they welcome it. What did you think of how the students responded to their union's censorship attempt? Let us know in the comments, and remember, when someone tries to decide what you're allowed to hear, they're usually afraid of what you might think.